Hello. So my talk today is going to be talking about the conviction gap, and I'll be talking about why I think platform engineering success requires more than just developer buy-in. A lot of mantras that are going about inside the platform ecosystem that I think could be holding back your team, your platform engineering initiatives. Going to run you through that in this presentation today, and hopefully convince you that developer buy-in is one component, but not the only component that's required. And what we actually also need is conviction in the various different projects that we're building out the initiatives for our platform engineering success. So, first of all, who am I? So, my name is Lou. I'm the field CTO at a company called Gitpod. We are effectively a platform secure and automated standardized development environments. We'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on today. But in the past life, I've been a platform engineer inside of companies building out internal developer platforms. And also, I have been a software engineer for the past 10 years, but now I work as the field CTO here at Gitpod. For fun, I like Olympic weightlifting, and I kind of think at this point that my hobbies are essentially collecting hobbies. But anyway, let's jump ahead and get into it. So, my initial controversial statement that I'm going to make and then hopefully justify as the presentation goes on is that I think platform leaders should be mandating more of their products and services that they're rolling out than they currently are. And we'll talk about that now. So, how many of these different mantras have you heard? Things like our developers should choose their tools and we shouldn't mandate our tooling. This is something that I hear a lot, especially when I'm talking with customers or conferences or speaking to other platform engineers working on teams, that we sort of say that developers should choose their tools and we don't want to push tools on developers. And this has become a very common mantra that we have been repeating to ourselves. However, there is one thing, and that is, as I've moved from the platform space and into the product space, I've grown to an appreciation effectively for this idea of conviction. Because conviction is effectively fuel that drives meaningful progress. And by conviction, I mean understanding the direction that you're taking and understanding and having a deep sense inside of your gut and knowing that the decisions that you're taking and the direction that you're taking, your company, your platform, your developer experience is going in a positive direction for your business and also for the developers that are accessing your platform. Now, typically, when it comes to rollout strategies for platform, we present these as what I would say is a false dichotomy, right? So, those are two sides of the spectrum that we present, and one of them is top down. This idea that we're forcing developers to use a tool. Maybe it's something that leadership chose. It's some sort of horrific enterprise tool with hideous developer experience, that was kind of bought on the golf course. And as platform teams, we kind of see this as selling out. We see it as, our fellow developers will never forgive us for forcing a tool on them that they don't like. And that's one side of the spectrum. And then the other side is then bottoms up. It's this sort of more romantic view of developer tool and adoption. But I think it's one that's oftentimes quite naive. And it's this idea that tools just emerge and developers pick the tools that they want to use. And that's how we drive adoption, is by letting our developers choose their tools in its entirety. But in reality, this sort of bottoms up narrative rarely ever happens in reality. There are certain aspects of it that are certainly true, but it often ends up to this kind of if you build it and they will come type of outcome where you build tools and basically people don't use them because you're waiting for this very organic kind of bottoms up adoption that maybe doesn't happen. So, we're going to talk a bit about today alternatives that don't necessarily take this very polar view, top down, bottoms up, and rather think about it more from first principles. So, as platform teams, we should be thinking a little bit less delivery, a little bit less engineering manager, which is, typically the background of a platform engineer. We come from engineering, we come from delivery, maybe we come from operations, something like this, and a little bit more product, which is actually a very different type of world and requires different skill sets, different thinking, different approach. So, a definition of a PM is to deliver business impact by marshalling the resources of your team to identify and solve the most impactful customer problems. What that effectively means is that we need to understand what those problems are for our business within our platform and then be able to have the conviction to roll those out once we have an understanding of how big or if those problems are problems that we should be solving at all. But how do we do that? We do that principally by looking at two different primary stakeholders. There are often more outside of this, but these are typically the most important ones when it comes to platform. The first one of those is developers, obviously, the end users of our tooling and our platform. Now, if we're going to champion on their behalf, if we're going to be picking and understanding tools and rolling those out across our organizations, we need to know our developers' workflows. You would not you would be surprised how many platform engineers I talk to when you ask questions about their developer tooling and they simply don't know. This is something that's essential. As a platform team, you're advocating for developers, so you must understand what tools they use, their workflows, their pains, their habits. You have to understand that intimately. For sure, mandating a tool is going to feel painful if you don't feel like you already understand your developers. But if you do, then when you're mandating and rolling out a tool, then it's going to feel a lot better if you understand your developers and you understand that the change and the tool that you're bringing about is going to make an impact for them. Two of my favorite questions for really understanding this is tell me and show me. This comes from the sort of user experience, user research space, where rather than asking developers things like, what do you want? What would you like? Do you want an internal developer portal? Instead, you look at their workflows. Can you show me how you work? Can you tell me about the last time you fixed a bug, you solved a production outage, you accessed your log dashboard? And that's going to give you a much clearer understanding of how your developers work today. And that's going to help you build conviction when it comes to rolling out specific tools. The second side of that, and often forgotten, usually the developers are the ones who are advocating for, is the business strategy. And ultimately, are trying to understand, is the thing that I'm solving for actually a problem for my business? Do the leaders inside my business care? A good proxy for this is if you set up a meeting with your leaders or someone inside of your organization and they don't turn up or they don't prioritize it, it could mean that A, they don't see it as a problem, or B, maybe you're not pitching it, positioning it, or talking about how that solution solves their problem in a way that makes sense for them. Now, typical questions that really help here is, asking your leaders what keeps them up at night. What is the most strategically important thing for them? What is the thing on their roadmap they would love to see shift? Once you have that picture of developers and also the picture of your leadership, that starts to build that conviction that helps you make decisions and then roll out tools with confidence. Now, to put some meat on the bone and give some real world examples, I would love to talk to you about how we actually do this for secure and automated development environments within Gitpod. One thing that I think that Gitpod does very well is actually trying to understand from the customers that we engage with whether or not they have a meaningful problem that secure and automated development environments can solve. Typically, though, it's interesting that organizations don't actually know how many problems they're actually having. Typically, when we run through this process with them, this becomes a very illuminating process for them where they start to shine a light on different pain points within their organization, and that can help them then prioritize. In this case, our solution, but this is the same process that you can use for evaluating a tool that either you're looking to build, to buy, or to generally integrate into your platform as well. Now, as I say, this process could be used for actually adopting any tool. It doesn't matter if that's specifically Gitpod or any others. Now, the first step in that is to do, typically from our side, is running a survey. Now, we run that survey really to try and quantify and understand, is this a problem worth solving? And that's typically sent out to the developers or those that will be using the product. In our case, that's asking developers things like how many hours they spend on broken development environments, how much time are they wasting? Because that gives us an idea and a quantifiable understanding of what is the pain points for our developers and how big is that problem? Is it a big problem? If it's not a big problem, we don't necessarily need to solve for it. The second step then is to gather quotes. Really bonus points here if you can get quotes from long tenured developers or senior people within your organization. Because if you've got quotes from them saying that they're wasting, let's say, a day, multiple days, a week on a specific pain point, then you're touching on something that's really important. Even if the folks that have been at your company for years can't solve that, that's something that's potentially worth investing in. And then the final bit, like I mentioned, is understanding those business priorities. You want to understand and you want to be really honest with yourself at this point is, does your company see this as a problem? Does this align with what your company is trying to achieve? Sometimes this might be cost cutting. Let's say if you're going for an IPO, trying to reduce costs. You might be in a growth phase. You're trying to hire, you're trying to onboard, you're trying to bring developers into your organization. So ideally, the problem that you're solving is complementary of that business and strategic objective. You have to be honest with yourself here. You have to understand if you're actually solving a strategic business priority. Oftentimes we're not. And if we're getting pushback and we're getting adoption problems, it's typically because we don't have a pain point for our developers, or our leadership and our business doesn't actually care that much about what we're trying to solve for. We're excited, but they're not. How that then manifests in our case is having a calculated return on investment. For us, that means understanding a multiplication, right? How many engineers are suffering the problem? What is the quantifiable impact of that problem? In our case, usually time and developer productivity time lost. And then what does that quantify it into in terms of money? That helps create a really nice business case to understand, is this worth solving, and what would be our return if we were to invest in a solution to fix this problem base. Now, as you'll see here, a lot of what we've talked about here is not solution based. It's purely problem based. What is the problem that you're faced with? Oftentimes, as platform engineers, we come in too happy about solutions. Actually, we need to be looking at whether we are seeing problems in our organization. And that brings us full circle to this original question. And it poses this question, which is, if we have conviction and we have data, we've done research and we've done our homework, that the problem that we're solving is meaningful not only for our business, but is also acceptable by our developers and will solve a meaningful pain point for them, why should we hold back tooling? Why should we then lean on some of these potential crutches, sort of saying that our developers should choose their tools, or that, we shouldn't necessarily mandate? Because if we've done our homework, then we should actually drive the initiatives and drive onboarding into our initiatives. And with this, someone will always complain. I think this is a common mistake that platform engineers make, is when one or two developers might complain about a tool, we immediately get cold feet and we start to hold back on our initiative rollouts. The thing is, developers, we're very, sort of particular about the tools we use. So somebody is always going to complain. So what I'm going to say to you as a platform engineer is just be okay with that. Obviously, there are times when you should listen because those developers are giving you a signal that you should certainly listen to and not ignore. But you don't want to be put off if one or two people don't necessarily agree with your decision. That's just how it goes. As a leader, it's something you have to get used to, that not everyone is going to think that every idea is a great idea. Someone is going to complain. If anything that I talked to today resonates with you, what I would suggest actually, if you go to gitpod.io/white papers, we actually have some white papers that talk about the ROI of basically development environments that Gitpod roll out, some different use cases there. And that should give you some ideas and thoughts about how to build out these use cases yourself for whatever it is that you're solving. Now, as I mentioned before, we should start with a problem statement, before you start to look into this, but this should give you some ideas of different ways that you might want to structure business cases and different ways to build conviction when you're rolling out tools internally. Now, one final thing before I leave you is that we're working on something within Gitpod that is very cool, and I think you're going to love it. It has everything to do with agents, parallel development environments, background agents, something that I'm talking about in a separate talk here at PlatformCon. But you can see that all at owner.com. If you head over there, you'll get a sneak peek of what we're building. It's going to be released at some point this summer. And for some specific companies, you might be able to drop onto the waitlist and get access even earlier to try out what we're working on. So owner.com for that. Otherwise, thank you so much. If you're going to be in London or in New York, we'll have a booth at both of those locations. So come along and speak to us. If you disagree with anything I've said or you want to talk about it more, drop by the booth and we'll have a conversation about it. And if not, some of these other platform events later on in the year, like AWS Summit and KubeCon and reInvent, will be there too if you want to swing by and say hello. But otherwise, enjoy PlatformCon. Thank you so much.